Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon from the Batcave. It is Tuesday. Looks like it's Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. And we're going to talk about Josiah, and then we're going to get into the prophet Zephaniah. It's just the 4th chapter. So we're actually coming to the close of the book of 2 Kings, which is basically going to take us right up to Jeremiah. Jeremiah is going to overlap with it, but we're on chapter 22, and there's just 3 more chapters to go. Most of the remainder, we're going to cover chapter 22 and 23. 24 and 25 is really going to basically be about the fall of Jerusalem, and it's going to very much correspond with the book of Jeremiah. Also, it's going to be early on in chapter 25, I believe it is, where Ezekiel and Daniel are going to be deported, and so their books start there, but we're going to do those after we've finished 2 Kings. So we're going to just kind of jump on a new section of the prophets in exile and things like that. So we're going to just start here on chapter 22. We're going to read through Josiah and what's going on with him, and then we're going to jump over to Zephaniah, who it makes really clear right in the beginning that happened during Josiah's reign. So it says, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah of Boscath. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And it came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah that the king sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the scribe, to the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the priest, that he may sum the silver which is brought into the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the door have gathered of the people. And let them deliver it into the hand of the doers of the work, to have oversight of the house of the Lord, and let them give it to the doers of the work which is in the house of the Lord, to repair the breaches of the house. So they're basically doing maintenance and upkeep and kind of updating on the temple, just because the materials are wearing out over time, and so they're hiring people to repair it. So they're getting new wood products, probably they're doing gold overlays, things like that, and says that unto carpenters, to builders, to masons, to buy timber and hewn stone to repair the house. So Jerusalem has been invaded. The temple may have been plundered in the past. Or it just might be time, because the thing's 500 years old. So there's been some just wear and tear on it, and they're going to raise basically kind of a levy to do that. But I think it's a voluntary levy. So it says, Howbeit there was no reckoning made with them of the money that was delivered into their hand, because they dealt faithfully. And Hilkiah the priest said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan to read it. And Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought the king word again, and they said, Thy servants have gathered the money that was found in the house, and have delivered it into the hand of them that do the work, that have the oversight of the house of the Lord. And Shaphan the scribe showed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest has delivered me a book. And Shaphan read it before the king. And it came to pass, when the king had heard the words of the book of the law, that he rent his clothes. And the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam the son of Shaphan, and Achbor the son of Micaiah, and Shaphan the scribe, and Azahiah the servant of the king, saying, Go ye, inquire of the Lord for me, and for the people, and for all Judah, concerning the words of this book that is found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not hearkened unto the words of this book, to do according to all which is written concerning us. So if you want to remember, at least for the past 70 years, between maybe not 70 years, but probably closer to like 55, 60 years, you're going to have between Manasseh and his son Amon. You're going to have all kinds of idolatry going on. The legitimate priesthood, they don't really get into what happened to them. There are rumors and traditions that say they went to Elephantine Island in Egypt and eventually to Ethiopia, and that could be true, or that could be another priesthood that kind of established itself after the temple was destroyed. We don't really have a clear historical record to establish that, but what we have is at least generations going on, because we know we had somewhat of a revival in Hezekiah's day, but we have at least a generation going on where they're not touching the law, they're not doing anything with it. And so he finds out how badly they're going off track and not keeping the law, and it says, So Hilkiah the priest and Ahikam and Achbor and Shaphan and Asaiah went up to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she dwelt in Jerusalem in the college, and they communed with her. So this word college, I've looked into this before. this is where your false prophetic movements are going to say, see, they're a college of prophets, therefore we can charge you to become a prophet and kind of make up schools to being a prophet. The word is Mishnah. So it says properly a repetition, a duplicate copy of a document, or a double in amount by application of second in order and rank and quality and location, college, copy, double, fatlings, second in order, twice as much. So the word can be translated college, but what it seems to be is a place where there is a copy of the law. That's why you keep seeing copy of a document and duplicate and stuff like that. And it could be a place where the law is studied, and this is a prophetess who's studying it, and she knows what's going on. She knows they're not keeping it. So she's looking at it and going, well, what are we in for? And she said to them, thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, tell the man that sent you to me, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon this place and upon the inhabitants thereof, even of all the words of the book which which the king of Judah hath read. Because they have forsaken me and have burned incense unto other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands, and therefore my wrath shall be kindled against this place, and shall not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, which sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you shall say to him, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord, when thou heardest what I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, that they should become a desolation and a curse, hast rent thy clothes, and wept before me. I have also heard thee, saith the Lord. Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring on this place. And they brought the king word again. So basically, through this Huldah, the prophetess, and this is the only time we know anything about her. She's her job is to keep her the wardrobe, but she is a prophetess, and it seems like she's in a place where there's probably a copy of the law. That would be my guess, or the prophets, or something like that. So maybe it's a place where they're copying royal records and prophetic records and stuff. But this is actually the law of Moses. This is probably the Pentateuch that they're finding, and basically through her, God says because Josiah repented, God's going to kick the can down the road, if you will, and not destroy them in his generation. Now, he already decided to destroy them because of Manasseh's sin, even though Manasseh repented. But then Ammon's going to get right back into it because the damage is already done. He's already told Hezekiah that they're going to go into captivity into Babylon, but he hasn't established when it's going to happen. And so he has the right to keep pushing it down the road as long as there's repentance going on. So he's going to do that. And then he says, and the king sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. And the king went up to the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. And the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart, with all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant which are written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah the priest and the priests of the second order and the keepers of the door to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal. So you want to keep track of how much idolatry has been normalized in Judah and Jerusalem by this time. So all the vessels made for Baal and for the grove and for the host of heaven. And he burned without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel. So he said he burned them in Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron and carried the ashes into Bethel. So apparently it's known that this stuff is coming through northern Israel. That's why he's going to Bethel with it. Then it says he put down the idolatrous priests who the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in high places in the cities of Judah and the places round about Jerusalem, them that burned incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to the host of heaven. So they're essentially worshiping the Canaanite Baal, and it looks like they're probably worshiping the astral deities of Babylon. That looks like what's going down here. So when he says he put down, it just says he shabath. He made them to desist. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he killed them. It just says he's making them to stop performing their priestly rites there. Then he says, and he brought out of the house from the Lord without Jerusalem unto the brook of Kidron, and burned it in the brook of Kidron, and stamped it into small powder, and cast the powder thereof on the graves of the children of the people. And he broke down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the woman wove hangings for the grove. So the word Sodomites, let's see, it says So when he says grove, you see Asherah, okay? Asherahs would be whatever these are. They have to do with sacred groves. And like I said, they're probably something like carved trees to be idolatrous images related to Asherah. So she's basically the prostitute or the whore or whoever who was involved with the creation of the Nephilim. Baal, like we've talked about many times, is basically a perversion of Yahweh appearing in the whirlwind to Job, and that develops afterwards. The rest of these, it says the hosts of heaven, the Mazalah, and the Mazalah apparently could be the planets, or I think it's called the Mazaroth, which is the constellation. The hosts of heaven is probably the constellation. So it's essentially the sun, the moon, the planets, and the constellations. So these are all the astral deities, and I'm sure they're different in each culture, but this is probably the Babylonian system that's pretty prominent by this time. And then he says, it says, he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem unto the brook of Kidron, and burned it at the brook of Kidron, and stamped it to powder. He says, and he cast the powder thereof in the graves of the children of his people. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites, and it says Kadesh. So the word Kadesh is based around the word holy. So notice it says quasi-sacred person. So I think Kadosh is the word holy. So this is clean, ceremonial, or morally appointed, bid, consecrated, dedicated, defiled. So their idea of a sacred person is like a temple prostitute. And so it's a male word, and so it's a male devotee by prostitution to licentious idolatry, sodomite, unclean. So it's not specifically homosexuals. It's specifically homosexuals ordained for essentially cult prostitute homosexuals. Now, that doesn't mean all homosexuality is not wrong, but he's just saying that that's what he's taking down. So there probably is other homosexuality in the land. Then he says, that were by the house of the Lord. So they had temple prostitutes right by the temple, the legit temple. It says where the women wove hangings for the grove. So the whole business of all this idolatry was right around the temple complex. Then it says he brought all his priests out of the cities of Judah in the defiled high places where the priests had burned incense unto Geba and Beersheba, and break down the high places and the gates where they were entering of the gate of Joshua the governor of the city, that were on the left man's left hand at the gate of the city. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they did eat of the unleavened bread among their brethren. So it looks like these were actually Levites who were consecrated to this false worship, and yet they're still getting their portion from the unleavened bread that these guys are going to get from the daily temple sacrifice, or the showbread or whatever. So they're still getting their portion from the Levites' portion, even though he's basically just fired them from their jobs, but now they're going back to being regular Levites. Then he says, and he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom. So this is where they would be sacrificing to Molech. I'm not entirely sure about Topheth, a place near Jerusalem. So I think that's another god, but it can be it could be the place where they're doing it. So it says, which is the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man may make his son or daughter pass through the fire to Molech. So I think Topheth is the location. The valley of Hinnom, it says the children of Hinnom. Let's see another translation here. Which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so the valley of the children of Hinnom. And again, that's where Gehenna is going to come from, or the burning pit, which becomes the epithet for the everlasting lake of fire. So then he says, he took away the horses of the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entering of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan Melech, the chamberlain, which was by the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. So the whole idea of chariots of the sun, I've actually read about this in other pagan mythology. I think that's a Hindu thing. No, it was the Persians who did it. So the Persians had these chariots of the sun, and the idea was that it's kind of like how Ra, they would say Ra carries the sun across the sky in a boat, or he pushes it across the sun in a boat. Well, there's just different versions of the sun god, and the Persian version of it would have these chariots pulling the sun across the skies. And so they apparently had some model chariots to this pulling the sun across, which means they're absorbing stuff from Babylon, from Persia, and this is probably, you'd probably consider this like Zoroastrian stuff. So I want you to see this, that even before they go into captivity, they're absorbing Babylonian and Zoroastrian stuff, not just the local Canaanite stuff or the Egyptian stuff. Then it says the altars that were on the top of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the king of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts in the house of the Lord, did the king beat down and break them down thence and cast the dust of them in the brook of Kidron. So they actually have altars to foreign gods in the temple. And he says the high places that were for Jerusalem, that was on the right hand in the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, and the abomination of the Moabites, did the king defile. So defiling them probably means he's doing something so that it's no longer holy to promote the sacrifice. It could just mean he's destroying it. But these are things that have been there since the days of Solomon. So even though they have had revivals, like in the days of Hezekiah and Jehoshaphat and stuff like that, there's a handful of revivals they had. They still have these temples to foreign gods that Solomon's built for all these hundreds of years. Then he says he brake into pieces the images and cut down the groves and filled their places with the bones of men. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place, which Jeroboam the son of Nimbat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both the altar and the high place, he broke down and burned the high place and stamped it to small powder and burned the grove. So my guess is that he's not necessarily killing people to put the bones of men there, but he's putting bones there to defile it. So in other words, it's because it's a burial site for dead man's bones, it's too defiled to use for their holy ordinances. Because you got to remember, even though these are false gods, they're worshiping them like they're holy gods. So they probably have purity rituals similar to what the temple is, and they're like, well, there, now you've got dead bodies there and dead bones there, and you can't worship there anymore. So he's trying to make this permanent, that this never comes back. Then he says, and as Josiah turned to himself, he spied the sepulchres which were there on the mountain. He sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them on the altar and polluted it, according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, which proclaimed these words. So this is all the way back from 1 Kings 13, when they first put up the golden calf to worship in Bethel, and you have the unnamed prophet that goes there and says such and such is going to happen, and a king named Josiah is going to defile this. And then another prophet tests him by saying, hey, come to my house and eat. And the guy says, no, the Lord told me not to come back. And he's like, but you can come for me because I'm a prophet too. And then he goes with the guy and eats. And he says, because you did this, you're going to die. And the guy gets eaten by a lion. And the prophet knows he's true, but he also feels bad because he tested him and caused him to stumble. And so he says, bury him in my grave. And so the prophet who tested him and the prophet whose word this was are both buried together. And so it says, he spied the sepulchres that were on the mount, and he's fulfilling this word. And then he says, what title is that I see? And the men of the city told him, it is the sepulchre of the man of God, which came from Judah. So that's the only name they have for this guy. Nobody knew who he was because he gets killed by a lion. And it's just like, then he gets buried. So it's like, who was this guy? Nobody knew. That's why in the earlier story, he's unnamed. That's just all they know about him. And he said, and proclaim these things about the altar done in Bethel. And he said, let him alone, let no one move his bones. So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet that came out of Samaria. So they know who these guys are. It's the prophet that deceived him to die, and then the prophet that had the prophecy. And they're leaving them there because these guys were both about saying the word of the Lord is going to come to pass, and it's now coming to pass. And he said, let him alone, let no man move his bones. So they let his bones alone. And then he said, and all the high places, all the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke the Lord to anger, Josiah took away and did to them according to the acts he had done to Bethel. So he's defiling them. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were upon the altars and burned men's bones upon them and returned to Jerusalem. So he's not just doing that, but he's killing the priests. Now, this is important because if you remember, like a generation earlier, when Samaria was taken captive, they put other people there, and they put a false priest there, and that priest is going to have them following the law of the land. So they're actually following the Deuteronomy covenant while worshiping other gods. So the Samaritans are doing a mix of good things and bad things. And whoever this priest is would have been one of the priests of the golden calves that came before that. So it seems like he's finally taking them out. It's saying this is in Samaria. It doesn't really say if it's that exact same priest or that line of priests, but it probably is. It seems like he's taken out everything but what's worshipped in Jerusalem now. It says, the king commanded all the people, keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as is written in the book of the covenant. Surely there was not holden such a Passover from the days of the judges that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel, nor the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, when the Passover was holden in the land of Jerusalem, moreover, with the workers of familiar spirits, and the wizards, and the images, and the idols, and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Jerusalem, and Judah and Jerusalem, did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law that are written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. So he is cleansing the entire land of idolatry. This is really solid. It's not a permanent fix. They're already toast, but he is cleansing the entire land of idolatry, which is what should have been done centuries ago, but they've always left stuff behind, and this is why it just keeps coming back. What's this, people say? And then, some old person who used to worship it says, let me tell you the secrets of the mysteries, and they bring it back into style. So he's clearing it all out. He's defiling everything. He's like, I don't want this ever to come back ever. He's trying to save Israel, and he does a pretty good job until he gets stupid. So he says, and like unto him, there was no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his might, according to the law of Moses. Neither after him arose any man like him. Notwithstanding, the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his wrath, wherewith the anger was kindled against Judah, because of the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal. So God's still saying, you're toast, but I won't do it until you're dead, and Josiah is going to die young. And the Lord said, I will remove Judah out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will cast off the city Jerusalem, which I have chosen, and the house of which I said my name shall be there. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up. Now this is wrong, because it says went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. It's not against. He went up to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria is his ally. And what he is doing is he is going up against the king of Babylon. So he's going up to aid the king of Syria against Nebuchadnezzar's army. Nebuchadnezzar is a young man, and it's Nebuchadnezzar's grandfather, Nabopolassar, who is leading the attack on Nineveh itself. So while he's attacking Nineveh itself, Nebuchadnezzar is attacking Carchemish, which is the main trade city between the heartland of Assyria, if you will, and Canaan and Egypt, essentially. So he's going up against it, and this is going to happen around, I think it's 612 BC. And then when that happens, let's see if Necho's mentioned in this article. No, he's not. But Necho is going to go up to fight, and he's supposed to fight Nebuchadnezzar to aid the king of Assyria. And if he beats Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to go up and rescue the king of Assyria from being taken over by the Babylonians. And he fails. What he's going to do, it says, Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo as he had seen him. So we'll go over this again when we get to Chronicles. There's always more details. Chronicles is usually going to have more details on the Judah stuff, but essentially, he goes up to him, and he's like, I'm going to go fight you. Why? Because this is not really explained clearly, but they're allies with Babylon. That's why they're worshiping the host of heaven from Babylon. They've been allies with Babylon since they went up to visit Hezekiah. They've been friends. And Egypt, they were allies with too against Assyria, but they got overthrown by Necho. But Jerusalem remained allies with Babylon. And remember, in Manasseh, they apparently put down Babylon, and then they put down Manasseh, and these guys are rebelling again. So he says, his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead. So he said, Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and according to all his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bands in Riblah and in the land of Hamath, so that he might not reign in Jerusalem. And he put a land to tribute for 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in room of Josiah's father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. Now, this is interesting because Eliakim, I believe, means something like God of raising. So El is God of, so it can be kind of a generic word of God. And it says God of raising. So then Jehoiakim means Jehovah will raise. So I think, because it's Jehoiakim, El-Yakim, I think they have the same meaning. I think they just change El to with Yahweh, essentially. Jehoiakim and El-Yakim are basically, and this is where people are going to say that El and Yahweh were two different gods. Well, there's some truth to that because the Canaanites worshipped a god called El too. Think of El like Allah, okay? So El is a generic word. Elohim can mean the gods, or it can represent the triune Godhead, depending on its usage. Eliakim, so El represents a generic word for single God. So like Allah is actually Al-Ilah, and it just means the God. So it's a generic word for the Most High God, basically. It's not a name, it's a title, the God, okay? And there's a version of that in Canaan, it's El. In Hebrew would use El and Eloah. And then in Aramaic, they would use Aloha. Aloha, okay? And these are probably all versions of somewhere in between the Hebrew word and the Sumerian Akkadian word Enlil. Enlil literally means Lord Spirit. And El is probably like a shortened of Enlil. That would be my guess. But it was just kind of a generic word for God. It's like how the Native Americans call it the Great Spirit. So Lil typically meant spirit. So El, Eloah, and Al-Lilah, you're going to see the Lils in there. But he is, for whatever reason, this Eliakim, which seems to be distinct, he changes his name to Jehoiakim, which has Jehovah in it. And I don't know why he does this. I don't know if he's honoring the God Jehovah, but he did tell Josiah that Yahweh, that his God, told him to go up against Nebuchadnezzar. So maybe he did. And Josiah got in the way, and he kills him. And it says, so then he took Jehoahaz. So that's like Jehovah sees, Ahaz sees, and he came to Egypt, or Mid-Trib, and he died there. So this guy's just going to be king for a few months because Josiah's dead, and then as soon as Necho's done fighting his battle with Nebuchadnezzar, and he loses because his army's been weakened by Josiah's army, he goes back and he's a little ticked off, and so he takes their king prisoner, puts his son on the throne. He says, "You're in charge now. You're my puppet king. I got your dad, and give me some monies for your offense." So then Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money according to the commandment of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and gold from the people of the land to everyone according to his taxation, and gave it unto Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old, and when he began to reign, he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zebudah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. And he did that was evil in the sight of the Lord according to all his fathers done. So we're going to leave that there, and then we're going to enter in when these guys start. Jeremiah actually gets commissioned as a young lad when Josiah is king. But he's not really going to start prophesying until this Jehoiakim is king. And that's when we're going to start taking off with Jeremiah. So we'll leave that off there. And then we're going to go to now Zephaniah. And like I said, if you guys have been following along this whole thing, if you see this, just look at these first 5 books, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. And those are all basically in order. And it's basically going to span a time roughly corresponding to Hosea, a little after Hosea, to the time close to when they're getting set free from the Babylonian captivity under Daniel. And then you're going to enter seamlessly into the time of Ezra and Jeremiah. Well, the minor prophets is going to start with Hosea, a little before Isaiah in northern Israel. And these guys are roughly contemporary. Again, Joel, Amos, and Obadiah are probably before Hosea, or at least along the lines of the early part of Hosea. They're all during the days of Jeroboam II, so they're all roughly contemporary, all the way down to Jonah. And then the rest of these guys is Micah is kind of the latter part of Isaiah. Nahum is after Isaiah. Habakkuk is after Isaiah. And then Zephaniah is going to be between the time of Isaiah, who dies under Manasseh, and Zephaniah is going to be in Josiah. And then we would jump to Jeremiah, actually, if they're all in chronological order. And then these last 3 are going to be after the captivity. So one of these days, maybe I'll do a thing of the prophets and put them all in order like I did in my apostles' teaching. But I doubt it. That's a lot of work. So it doesn't. This is pretty well in chronological order if you understand the major project. The major prophets is one span of 4 in order. The minor prophets is another span of 12 in order. And I think those numbers 4 and 12 have some significance to them, kind of mystically. So I think that's on purpose, and that seems like a Holy Spirit thing, and I'm not going to touch that. So with that being said, we're going to go to Zephaniah, chapter 1. It's just 3 chapters here, and it says, "The word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, the king of Judah." Now, this Hezekiah seems to be spelled just like the other Hezekiah the king, but there's no clear reference to it to being the son of king. And since Manasseh was his oldest son, and then Josiah is the son of Manasseh, and he's going to start ruling at 8 years old, it seems that this guy being 1, 2, 3, 4 generations from Hezekiah would be too big of a stretch. So this is probably a different Hezekiah, but it's given in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, the king of Judah. He says, I will utterly consume all things from the land, saith the Lord. I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of heaven and the fish of the sea and the stumbling blocks with the wicked. I will cut off man from the land, saith the Lord. I will stretch out mine hand upon Judah and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will cut off the remnant of Baal from this place, and the name of the Chemarims with the priests. What the heck is a Chemarim? The Kamar, properly an aesthetic with self-masqueration and idolatrous priest. So they look like an aesthetic. They look like they're monks. Probably have foreign religions and stuff, or copying the foreign religions. So the Chemarims are some kind of monk with the priest. So he's going to cut off the remnant of Baal. Now, from where does he say? He just says from the land. So it's not very clear. What land is he talking about? So the Baals and the Chemarims with the priest. Well, it says, and them that worship the host of heaven upon the housetops, and them that worship, that swear by the Lord, that swear by Milcom. That's another way of saying Milcom. And I believe Milcom is the Ammonite version of Molech. I'm not positive on that, but it's a pretty good guess. So now we're getting closer. Okay, this is clearly a prophecy against Judah. And this prophet is probably prophesying before Josiah has all his reforms, and Josiah is probably responding to that. So he says, and them that were turned back from the Lord, and those that have not sought the Lord nor inquired from him, hold thy peace at the presence of the Lord God. So I like hearing his actual name. Hold thy peace at the presence of Adonai Yahovah. So the Lord Jehovah, the Lord Yahweh. For the day of the Lord is at hand, for the Lord Jehovah has prepared a sacrifice and has bid his guests. So if you know your New Testament, you would know, well, sounds exactly like Revelation 19, where he is, this is the wedding feast. This is after the bride and groom have merged together and they host a wedding feast together, and that is the marriage supper of the Lamb, that begins with this, him calling all the birds and the fowls to feast on the kings and of their flesh, and then it proceeds into the millennium. So he has prepared a sacrifice. He has bid his guests. The sacrifice is the kings that are going to be destroyed. And so you see Revelation 19 says, I saw an angel standing by the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying, the fowls in the midst of heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great God. And he goes on to say these kings and all that are the supper. So it says, it shall come to pass in that day of the Lord's sacrifice that I will punish the princes and the king's children and all such as are clothed with strange apparel. In the same day I will punish all those that leap on the threshold, which fill the master's houses with violence and deceit. I don't know what leap on the threshold would mean. It says a stretcher, a sill, a threshold, spring. I don't know what that means. Leap over the threshold and fill their master's house with violence. It's probably a superstition. That's what I would guess, is leaping over the threshold. So it says, on that day, says the Lord, a cry will be heard from the fish gate, from the second quarter, a loud crash from the hills. I believe the fish gate is the gate that goes down towards Joppa, where there'd be fish. Either that, or I imagine it goes up towards the Sea of Galilee, where there'd be fish. And then it says, a wail from the second quarter, a loud crash from the hills. The inhabitants of the mortar wail. The inhabitants of the mortar, eh? The inhabitants of Maktesh. Whoop. For the merchant people are cut down, all they that bear silver are cut off. And it shall come to pass in that time that I will search Jerusalem with candles and punish the men that are settled in their lees, that say in the heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. So they just don't believe in the Lord. This is all just time and chance, and the Lord's not really involved. Therefore their goods shall become booty, and their houses a desolation. They shall also build houses, but not inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards, but not drink the wine thereof. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near. It hasteth greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord, the mighty men shall cry bitterly. So even though the context of this is in the days of Josiah, the pattern is going to be like in the days of the book of Revelation. And so the day of the Lord being near is going to be when the Lord starts executing his judgment, which is this basically Armageddon followed by the millennium. And so this is what he's saying. The day of the Lord is wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. So again, he's hearkening to the same things said in Joel, which is about that same day. And then Isaiah 22 says the same thing. Amos says the same thing. Amos 5, remember, these things are going to correspond to historical events, but ultimately be about the very last days of the eschaton. He says, the day of trumpet and alarm against the fenced cities and against the high towers. I will bring distress upon man and men, and they shall walk like blind men because they have sinned against the Lord. And their blood shall be poured out as dust, and their flesh like dung. Now the day of the Lord starts when the seventh trumpet is blown. So he says the day of trumpet and alarm against the fenced cities and against the high towers. And he says neither. So this is going to correspond with what Jesus says in Luke 2 when he says, I will bring distress upon men. They will walk like blind men because they've sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out as dust and their flesh like dung. Neither the silver or gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath. So when you see the day of the Lord's wrath, this is not a generic term. Yes, there's going to be minor type fulfillments of this in the ancient historical past with destructions of cities and whatnot, but it's ultimately pointing to the day between the seventh trumpet and the millennium. That 3.5 years of just tearing everything up. So he says, but the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, and he will even make a speedy riddance of all them that dwell in the land. So the day of the Lord's wrath is formulated around the land of Judah because it's going to be ruled by the Antichrist at that time. This is, gather yourselves together, ye, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day passes chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you, seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment, seek righteousness, seek meekness, it shall be hid, it may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. So he's saying there's still time to repent until the day of the Lord starts. Once the day of the Lord starts, it's like everybody who's going to get it is going to get it pretty much at that time. There's no repentance after that. You might be lucky if you cut off your hand and if you took the mark of the beast. That I would still try that if you're around, but I'm not giving you a promise that that's going to help you. You just might be one handless guy when you go to get executed. He says, so seek the Lord. He says, seek righteousness, seek meekness. So humble yourself, and maybe there's still hope for you. For Gaza shall be forsaken, that's not Palestinians, and Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod as the noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. So we have two witnesses now, Joel 3 and Zephaniah 2, that say Gaza is going to be utterly emptied out of Gazans, of Palestinians. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, the nation of the Cherethites. So the Cherethites were, I believe, Philistine mercenaries that worked for David. He said, the word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, the land of the Philistines. I will even destroy thee, that there will be no inhabitant. Okay? So this is the Lord saying, when we're in the last days, Gaza's going to be utterly wiped out. Not just wiped out for nothing. The seacoast shall be dwellings and cottages for shepherds and folds for flocks. And the coast shall be for the remnant of the house of Judah. And they shall feed thereupon in the houses of Ashkelon. They shall lie down in the evening, for the Lord their God shall visit them and turn away their captivity. So could this be in the millennium? It could be, but more than likely there's going to be at least a minor type fulfillment in the days leading up to the Antichrist, because they're trying to fulfill these things that are supposed to be for Judah. And since we have that in Joel 3, let's go look at Joel 3 again real quick. And he says about Gaza, he says, you've cast lots for me, and he says, what do you have to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon? So there's where Hezbollah is, and the coast of Palestine. There's where the Gaza Strip is. Will you render me a recompense? If you recompense me swiftly and speedily, I will return your recompense on your head, because you have taken my silver and my gold and carried into your temples my good, pleasant things. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem you have sold to the Grecians, that you might remove them far from the border. Behold, I will raise them out of the place where you have sold them, and return your recompense upon your head. I will sell off your sons and your daughters in the hand of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabaeans, of people far off. The Lord has spoken it. So we have two witnesses that say in the last days, they're both related to the day of the Lord, that the Gaza Palestinians are going to be out of there. And also Hezbollah, also lower Lebanon, or southern Lebanon. So then he says, in the seacoast, let's see, I have heard the reproach of Moab and the revilings of the children of Ammon, where they have reproached my people and magnified themselves against their borders. So in other words, they're pressing into Israel's territory. This could be talking about the West Bank, because it really was Jordan that pressed into that territory, and then it became the West Bank after the Jews beat Jordan in, I think it was the 6-Day War. So then he says, therefore, as I live, saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab shall be as Sodom, and the children of Ammon as Gomorrah, even as the breeding of nettles and the salt pits, a perpetual desolation. The residue or remnant of my people shall spoil them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. So this is also going to be established in after, I think that the Golan Heights gets nuked. And so this is in my Revelation book. It's corresponding to Isaiah, I believe it's Isaiah 18, where it talks about Damascus being ruined. And within that context, it talks about stuff where, more where Ammon is than Moab, but being evacuated. But I would imagine if there's nuclear fallout. A lot of that stuff's going to be evacuated. And they're probably going to go populate Neom, which is going to be a growing metropolis by this time. It says, this shall they have for their pride, because they've reproached and magnified themselves against the people of the Lord of hosts. So notice he says, against the people of the Lord of hosts. This is kind of cryptic. He doesn't say Judah. He doesn't say the children of Judah. I would suggest that that's probably because it's not Judah. It's probably the church that they're magnifying themselves against. So they're up against the church, I would say. He said, the Lord will be terrible to them, for he will famish all the gods of the earth, and men shall worship him, everyone from his place, even to the isles of the heathen. So the Lord's going to force everyone to worship him in the day of the Lord. Yea, Ethiopians also shall be slain by my sword. Why is he killing Ethiopians or Cushites? I don't know. It could be because the king of the south is going to be part of this contingent that goes up to fight against Neom and then tries to go up and join Jerusalem. I wouldn't doubt that at all, and that could be who he slays around Basra. Then he says, and he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make Nineveh a desolation and dry like a wilderness. Now, when this prophecy is given, Nineveh is not yet destroyed. But this also seems to be a last days fulfillment. So is Nineveh going to be rebuilt? No, I don't think so. I think this is probably going back and forth between the present and the future. That would be my guess. And then he's saying, the flock shall lie down in the midst of her, and all the beasts of the nations, both the cormorant and the bittern shall lodge in the upper lintels of it. Their voice shall sing in the windows, desolation shall be in the thresholds, for he shall uncover the cedar work. And there is a possibility that Assyria is an epithet for Mystery Babylon at this point. I'm not positive, because I believe Assyria is an epithet for Laodicea, and I believe Laodicea becomes Mystery Babylon. So because Babylon is not in their heyday yet, and they might still be using Assyria as that epithet of the church that was, redeemed in the days of Jonah, which is corresponding to the first coming of Christ, destroyed in the days of Nahum, which is, or he prophesies it, and Zephaniah prophesies it too, which corresponds to the second coming of Christ. So it says, flock shall lie down in the midst of her, all the beasts of the nations, the cormorant, the bittern. Okay, we said this. And then this is the rejoicing city that dwelt carelessly, that said in her heart, I am, and there is none beside me. Oh, how she has become a desolation, a place for beasts to lie down in. And everyone that passes by shall hiss and wag his hand. So that is specifically, I said as a queen and am no widow. It's not the exact same thing they say in the book of Revelation, but it is a city that acts much like Mystery Babylon. So I would assume that there's some attachment there. It's just that city for that day is Assyria still. So Assyria is not destroyed yet, but it's coming quickly. Woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city. She obeyed not the voice, she received not the correction, she trusted not in the Lord, she drew not near to her God. Her princes within are roaring lions, her judges are evening wolves. They gnaw not the bones till the morrow. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons, her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law. The Lord is just in the midst thereof. He will not do inquiry every month. Every morning doth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame. I've cut off the nations, their towers are desolate. I made their streets a waste, none passeth by. Their cities are destroyed, so that there is no man, and there is none inhabitant. I said, surely thou wilt fear me, thou wilt receive instruction, so their dwellings should be cut off, howsoever I punished them. But they arose early and corrupted all their doings. Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up for prey, for my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour upon them my indignation, even for my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. All the earth will be devoured. This is how you can tell this is end times language. You're going to have a minor type of that when the Lord is kind of consuming the earth with all the armies thereof in his second coming. But this is really ultimately fulfilled at the end of the millennium, when the Lord is going to devour the whole earth in the fire of his jealousy, and there's going to be a new heavens and new earth. For then I will turn the people to a pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. So it looks like he's reversing the Tower of Babel. When he says pure language, he says barar, clear, make bright choice, chosen, clearly, polished, pure. Shafa, language. So what does that mean? Are they all going to speak Hebrew at that day? I don't know. Maybe they're all going to speak English. We don't know. It looks like he's going to fully reverse the Tower of Babel, and the world's going to speak one language. And I would imagine it says that they may call on the Shem, the name of the Yahweh, and serve him with one echad consent, Shechem. And he said, for beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. And again, there might be a dual fulfillment to this bringing Israel back to the land thing. In this context, it seems like it could be after the second or after the end of the millennium, which doesn't seem. Why would they be regathered at the end of the millennium? This is how you kind of know that the Gog-Magog invasion can't be at the end of the millennium. Why would God wait till the end of the millennium to regather Israel into the land? It's very clear he does that at the beginning. So it's like I can almost respect more somebody trying to merge Gog-Magog with Armageddon, even though they don't work, than trying to say it's only at the end of the millennium, because it talks about Israel being gathered after that into the land, and it doesn't make sense. So he says, in that day shalt thou be ashamed of thy doings, wherein thou hast transgressed against me. For then I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride, and thou shalt no more be haughty because of my holy mountain. So you see, even though he's calling it Assyria and that city, he's talking about my holy mountain here. Why? Because Mid-Trib Babylon is going to involve Israel. It could also involve Sinai, which is where Neam is. That would be called his holy mountain. So he has a couple of them. It says, I will leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of Yehovah, or Yahweh. The remnant of Israel shall not do iniquity, nor speak lies, neither shall the deceitful tongue be found in their mouth, for they shall feed and lie down, and none shall make them afraid. Sing, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all thine heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away thy judgments. He has cast out thine enemy. The King of Israel, even the Lord, is in the midst. So the King of Israel is the Lord. This is Josiah, who's really the last legitimate king of Judah before Christ comes. He has a couple sons reign, but they're pretty much puppet kings to Egypt and Babylon, and then they're gone. Okay, but he's saying the King of Israel is the Lord. So we're back to where they started. When the Lord comes, the King of Israel will be the Lord. So there's so much evidence that the Messiah, the King of Israel, is the Lord himself. The King of Israel, Yahweh, is in the midst of thee. Yahweh is Jesus. Okay? You can't mistake that. Yes, the Father has the name Yahweh too, but Yahweh is Jesus. He's the King of Israel. He's the one who was king when they're in the wilderness, and he's the one who will be king when he comes in the flesh and comes back to rule and reign as the God-man, Jesus. So he says, in that day it shall be said, Jerusalem, fear thou not, and to Zion let not thine hands be slack. The Lord thy God, so notice this is Yahweh Elohim. We're back to Yahweh and then the trifold Godhead. So we're right back in Genesis. In the midst of thee is mighty. So notice how he's saying Yahweh Elohim. This would be the name of the one who made Adam and Eve. Is in the midst of thee. So he's the King of Israel. So it's not just Yahweh, it's Yahweh Elohim. So it's very clear who it is. It's the one who made Adam and Eve. It's the one who showed up to Moses in the bush. It's the one who is going to be born to Mary. It's Jesus. And he said, he will save, he will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love, and he will joy over thee with singing. I will gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly, who are of thee to the reproach, to whom the reproach of it was a burden. Behold, at that time I will undo all that afflict thee, and I will save her that halteth, and gather her that was driven out, and I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. At that time I will bring you again, even in the time that I gather you, for I will make you a name and a praise among all people. So notice how he's reversing the curse. The curse is your name is going to be a byword to all people. He's saying, I'm going to make your name a praise to all people. So for those of you who will hear me or others being harsh about Israel during this time, you need to understand God said, and we read this in other prophets, that he would make their name a byword among his people. Okay? Paul is the one who fulfills that when he starts talking about the Jews and fulfilling their sin always, and they suck, basically. Even though he's a Jew, he's saying that. But we're not Jews anymore, we're Christians. So their name's a byword to Christians. Why? Because they wouldn't go forward into the new covenant with their Messiah. The nation of God is Christians now, it's not Jews. People who are going back to Messianic Judaism and Hebrew roots and all this stuff to try to bring back the good old days are really just bringing back the Antichrist. And so he's saying now, but eventually he will change their name from being a byword. But if you read your scriptures and you know your Old Testament prophets, you realize that the Jews are going to have to carry out the Mosaic sacrifices to their shame in the millennium. It's like God is going to teach all these Gentiles who don't know, these people who are born in the millennium, what these sacrifices meant. And the Jews are going to be carrying them out and realizing, oh, we were doing it again and again and again, and we never got it. It's to their shame that they have to do this. And they're not going to be able to approach the Lord during the millennium. So it says, he will make them a praise among the people of the earth when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith the Lord Yehovah. Okay? So God's ultimate goal is to restore Israel, but he is going to greatly humble them. He's already been humbling Christians to save them, which is why Jews were involved with getting Christians killed early on. And then they became a byword, and because the Christians multiplied more, the Jews started getting them. Well, we're not supposed to be puffed up against the Jews. We're certainly not supposed to be persecuting the Jews, and we're certainly not supposed to hate the Jews, but neither are we to glorify the Jews. God will glorify the Jews in due time, which is in the millennium. Up until that time, there's no benefit that's going to come to the church or the gospel mission by glorifying the Jews. There is no benefit that comes to your nation by helping the Jews. Those are all false doctrines that are built on scripture out of context. The Jews do not have a legitimate state that is independent until Jesus comes back. Anything before that is some kind of usurpation. It's not what it's supposed to be. So that's that. Zephaniah is basically calling out that Nineveh is going down, so he's kind of a second witness to Nahum. But in that context, he's talking about Judah going down. Why? Because Nineveh is going to go down to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's grandfather, and it's going to be within about 20 years of that Jerusalem's going to go down to Babylon too, even though they used to be an ally. And the reason is because they became an Egyptian puppet, and the Egyptians were allies with the Assyrians. So Babylon's going after them, and he's going to come to Jerusalem, and the prophets are going to prophesy, submit to him. Why? Because God has already said you're going to go into captivity to the Babylonians. You can't escape this. And the Jews are going to try to rely on Egypt and think they can because they're an Egyptian puppet. Egypt's not going to be able to help them, and that's going to end up with their temple being destroyed and them going into captivity. And that is how God is going to take them out of the land, like he said he was going to do through the prophets that led up to this point. So when we come back, we're going to get through Jeremiah, and that's going to be a long book, Jeremiah and Lamentations. It is 52 chapters. It's right up there with Isaiah in terms of length, and it has some weird breaks to it. It's kind of like, well, first of all, we've got Hilkiah. Now let's look at that. So it's interesting that Jeremiah is the son of Hilkiah. There's also a Hilkiah in the days of Eliakim. That was in the days of Hezekiah. There's a high priest named Hilkiah. So Jeremiah seems to be the son of the high priest Hilkiah. So it is a common name. It's not the same guy. And we're going to go through Jeremiah, and we're going to go through all his prophesying. It actually takes you a couple of times to the destruction of Jerusalem. So there's a little bit of overlap in it. I'll have to sort through that before I go through, but that is probably going to be at least 4 sessions in Jeremiah, at least. And then we're probably going to go from there to Ezekiel, and Ezekiel is pretty lengthy as well. Ezekiel is going to basically be part of the captivity. I think he's part of the captivity that goes out with Daniel, and he mentions Daniel in his writings, and he's going to be 48 chapters, so that's going to be long. So we're looking at probably a couple of months in just Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and then we're going to do Daniel. And Daniel we'll probably be able to do in a couple of sessions, maybe 3. Talk quite a bit about that in my other eschatology stuff, so it shouldn't take too long. And then we're into the post-exile. And at the time we're done with Daniel, we're going to start back over in Chronicles, and 2nd verse, same as the first, read our way through what happened with Judah. So hope you guys are blessed by that. If you're keeping up, read Zephaniah and start reading with Jeremiah, and we'll be there in a week. I am going to try to, on Friday, kind of give an eschatology update. I've been putting it off, honestly, because nothing really new happens in my mind when it comes to eschatology. It's usually just some additional details that fit into the paradigm I've already put forward. If you guys are interested in hearing me talk about eschatology, I'm usually going to just slap that on my playlist. So if you guys go review that, and you can see things I predicted in the past, and they're coming in the future. And the reason is because it's all in the Word. So I'll probably touch on the Gog-Magog stuff and what Trump is probably doing to advance Gog-Magog, whether he knows it or not, and America's downfall, whether he knows it or not. And we're probably going into World War III in this administration, whether they know it or not. But I think it's becoming clear to people. And we're probably in the last presidential race of America. If not, it's going to be probably super Dem and super revenge against the conservative Christians afterward. So it's not going to be good. Not going to be pretty. So anyways, I hope you guys are blessed by that. And I hope you, again, stay in the Word. When you get into eschatology, don't get weird. Don't jump on these bandwagons with new sensational things. Just learn the prophets, learn the book of Revelation, and then just get your paradigm sorted. Again, my Revelation book points that out. Everybody who's watching this channel should buy a copy of my Revelation book, okay? The Apostles' teaching might not be for everybody, but it might be for someone who's aspiring to teach and disciple Christians in the New Covenant. But the book of Revelation, my Revelation book is for everybody. It's solid stuff. It will simplify all this. It will pull in all these prophets that we've been talking about and just put it in a nice little ducks in a row for you. And you won't be shaken or deceived in terms of what's coming. It's going to be pretty simple for you. And then my Rightly Dividing book is definitely for anyone who aspires to teach or get into theology and get into apologetics in that form. So please continue to share, like, and subscribe. Share my books. Buy my books. And if you want to support me, I'm on Patreon. Anyone, like a $10 a month donation goes a long way. I'd love to get a couple hundred of those so I can just not really have to worry about income and just buy a house again and then just have my bills covered and just keep doing this full time. But the Lord will provide when it's due time. And I hope you guys stay in the Word and stay blessed. And Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.